Hey, welcome to the channel. I really appreciate those of you who are coming back for a visit again. If this is your first time here, let me initiate you. We prefer if you click like, subscribe to the channel, and definitely leave us a comment because you know things we want to know, and hopefully we know something that you want to know. It's a conversation, not just a monologue. Recently, we did an episode, Pat and I, where we talked about, among other things, a bonanza that departed an airport under less than ideal situation, and they had a problem almost immediately. Fortunately, there were no fatalities, but there was a lot of property damage. This kind of leads me to think about something that multi engine pilots do that single engine pilots tend not to do, and that is the pre departure brief at the hold short line. That may seem like an odd concept because we've done all our flight planning. We know our destination, we've looked at our weather, we know what we need for fuel, we've checked ourselves to make sure we feel well, that we're not sick, we've had plenty of rest, we've eaten, we're hydrated. All the things we need to do are in place. We're excited. Maybe we have people with us going on this trip and everybody's pretty jazzed about it. Or maybe everybody's flown 1,000 times and it's a pretty routine flight and it's a beautiful day, nothing to worry about. But there's still a good reason to do that pre departure brief right at the hold short line before you go. Multi engine pilots have an issue single engine pilots generally don't consider. What if we lose an engine? Now, single engine pilots, we practice that as student pilots. We do it on our flight reviews, but only having one engine, the solution is simple. We're landing now. Wherever we are, we're landing now. Might not be an ideal circumstance, but that's the best shot we've got. But that's the only option left to us once we've lost our engine. Multi engine pilots, that's not necessarily the case. How we handle an engine failure depends on where we are and what the circumstances are when that engine failure occurs. Possibly the worst situation is if that engine failure happens during the departure as we're taking off from the airport. That's the crux of why we do that pre departure brief. Basically, we'll say to the pilot next to us, or our passenger, or if we're alone, we'll say it to ourselves just so it's front of mind. Should anything happen, we know exactly what we're going to do. We don't have to lose a few seconds thinking about our options. And it goes a little like this. If we lose an engine on the takeoff roll before rotation, we're going to bring back the throttles, bring the aircraft to a stop on the runway. If we lose an engine after rotation, but with runway remaining, we're going to bring the throttles back, land the aircraft, bring it to a stop, even if that means going off the end of the runway. If we are to lose an engine after rotation with no runway remaining, we're going to clean up the aircraft, pitch for the appropriate speed, and make a decision then. Are we going straight ahead? Are we doing an emergency landing? Can we get the altitude we need to come back around? There are things to consider. But by thinking about that at the hold short line and verbalizing it and putting it right at front of mind, should something happen, we're in a much better position to deal with that issue productively, quickly, and that generally translates to as safely as possible. Now, I relate this to you because even as a single engine pilot, even as a low time private pilot, student pilot, there are things that can happen that are unexpected, that fall short of the engine failure or power loss, but they do create some kind of confusion or concern, and that's a distraction that's not helpful. I'll give you an example. Years ago, I was a flight instructor up in Connecticut. I was doing a night flight with one of my students. We had to get in that night cross country and some takeoffs and landings to meet the requirements of the private pilot certificate. And the aircraft in front of me, a Cessna 150, was a former student who had just gotten his ticket and was taking a friend for a night flight. They were very excited, as people are, when they finally get to fly with friends and family instead of flying with me. Trust me, nobody wants to fly with me. This was a non-towered airport, single runway, night. They departed on runway 18 and almost immediately made a very nervous radio call that something was wrong with the airplane. I'm sitting on the ground at the hold short line, so I can just call them and describe what's going on. And he came back and said, there's a loud banging sound. It's really, really loud. Where's the tail end of your seatbelt? Now, if you fly any given airplane enough, you start to get used to all the little things that can go wrong that if you're not paying attention, might get by you. And the Cessna 150, 152, one of the possibilities is when you cinch down your seatbelt and close the door, the tail end of that seatbelt, the adjustable part, is hanging outside the airplane. Well, when you blast that with 70 knots of airflow, it starts whacking against the aluminum frame of the airplane and it makes a hell of a noise. Sure enough, there was a short pause and then the radio call came back. Yeah, we're good. All he had to do was pop the door open, pull the strap in, and then close the door again. Had he not had somebody to talk to, if he was on that night flight alone and with a friend on one of his first solo flights after getting a certificate, and all of a sudden a really loud noise happens that he's not sure what it is, imaginations can go wild. That distraction combined with night, combined with the pressure of having a passenger who now doesn't know what's going on and you can't explain it, that can all go bad. But by having that moment to do a pre-departure brief, it doesn't have to be if we're going to lose an engine. If we have an issue, if something unexpected happens before we hit rotation, after we hit rotation with runway remaining, after we hit rotation but with no runway remaining, I've already made my decision about how I'm going to handle a problem. That could easily be I'm flying a PA-28, a Piper Cherokee, Warrior, Archer, great airplanes, but they sometimes don't latch right because there's the lower latch and the upper latch, and sometimes that door pops open. It makes a lot of noise because all of a sudden you've got all this airflow. Now, the door is not going to open up very far, but it does open and it makes noise. And people distract themselves in the cockpit trying to get that door closed again. There have been crashes where people have been so focused on closing the door, and by the way, you can't do it because of the low pressure happens when you're flying. It's just not going to close and latch again. The better choice is to say, oh, okay, I've got an issue that was unexpected. I've already decided this is after rotation. I have no runway remaining. I'm at 3, 4, 500 feet. I'm just going to come around and land again. Normal landing. Then we'll deal with the door. Now you've dealt with the situation appropriately and safely. And that's what we're shooting for. Look, if you fly for long enough, something's going to happen. Maybe it's something very minor, like a seatbelt tail sticking outside the door or the door popping open. Whatever it is, you can be prepared for it in a generic sense by having a plan of action before you even advance the throttle. And you can simply do that at the hold short line by just making it a practice, a personal checklist item to do a pre-departure brief, even if it's just you in the cockpit. Say it out loud just so it's at front of mind, and you'll be surprised how much that settles you down. And should you ever have an issue, it's going to be a whole lot easier to deal with that quickly, safely, productively, and you can be proud of yourself because that becomes a funny story now instead of an insurance claim and an NTSB report and who knows what else. Think about how you might make yourself a safer pilot because safe pilots tend to have a lot more fun than pilots that are not safe. Maybe put that into your regular flight routine, and I'm betting you're going to have a much better time with much fewer headaches for your entire flying career. Thanks a lot for considering it. I hope it helps you. I look forward to seeing you back here next time. And you first timers, that means you too. Just remember to click like, subscribe to the channel, and please leave us a comment. Have you ever had something happen right after departure that kind of threw you off? Let us know if you did and how you dealt with it. And we'll see you back here next time on Mad Props Aero.